Hey, how's it going, everybody? Thanks for stopping by. Today, we're going to go over the Repro 5. This is going to be part 1 of a two-part tutorial on the Repro 5. In part 1, what I'm going to cover is all the essential functions of Repro 5 that would be included in the basic Prophet 5 setup, as well as some other core functions like just getting into the fundamentals of the modulation matrix, the voices, and things like that. And in part 2, what I'm actually going to cover in the next video is going into the tweaks and going into the effects and going into the more advanced versions of the modulation matrix, because that's going to take a whole separate video on its own. But in part 1, we're going to cover all of this right here, basically, and everything that you need to create basically 90% of sounds that you're going to be creating on the Repro 5. And by the way, I just wanted to throw in a quick little plug. I got 90 presets for the Repro 5, and the link is right below this video. You can hear a demo video of the presets, and there's also the purchase link where you can get them. There's 90 presets. They got all kinds of basses, pads, leads, sound effects, atmospheres, and all kinds of stuff. It's called the Prophecy Sound Bank. Very high quality and great for projects like synthwave, for rock, like progressive rock synth, cinematic, film scoring, anything like that. So just please go ahead and check that out. I left the link down beneath this video, and you can see all those 90 presets there for the synthesizer. Now let's get back to the video. Now this is, again, it's not going to be a basic kind of synthesis tutorial. There's other tutorials out there for that. So I'm not going to say, okay, this is a sawtooth wave, this is an envelope. I'm going to go over what are the main functions of the Repro 5 specifically, and as quickly and efficiently as possible, how to create your own sounds. So let's go ahead and begin. When you pull up the synth right here, we're going to start from the top and kind of work our way down by main sections. So right away, the first thing that we can do is right click and go to init. This goes to an initialized preset. This is the presets window. And there's also the presets window right here, which is the standard UHE presets window. And you can save your own initial patches, like I have mine under user. But this is just a standard built-in initial patch. And you have obviously your tweaks page, and then that goes to the tweaks, and the synth page goes to the main synth. Then this is just a save button for your presets, undo, redo. If you're going to do something, you want to undo it, redo it as like a handy function when doing sound design. And right away, I'm going to put on multicore. What this does is it reduces basically like the CPU load from processing the synth, and it's especially useful when you put on high quality. High quality is especially noticeable like high resonance settings, FM, and things like that. And but that eats up a lot of CPU. So multicore basically kind of spreads out the synth across your cores of your computer, reducing your CPU load, and this combines well with high quality mode. For this video, I'm going to leave high quality mode off because it's going to make my recording of this tutorial a bit smoother, and there's no reason we need the highest quality sound when we're just doing an overview. But that's usually what you want to turn on, especially before you like bounce your final track. Is you want to make sure that both of these are on like that all the time. And then when you're just working, it's good just to have multicore on only, as it reduces CPU load, and without the high quality, you can basically make all the sounds you want. And they're going to basically sound the same minus a little bit of artifacts here or there. And then you turn on HQ and then you bounce your track or whatever you want to do. This is your master tuning. So this goes down and up by an octave. You double click and it takes you back to 0. That's your output level. This is actually useful because when you do different synth patches, sometimes your levels drop and you want to kind of bring the level back up. All right, so there's that. And this is the voices. it goes up to 8, although on the original Prophet 5, it only goes up to 5. On my personal, like, authentic Prophet presets, I like to set it as a default at 5, and then I'll go up to 8 if I really want to. Or you can bring it down for, like, when you're using Unison, for example. All right, and other such functions, but you bring it up to 8 as the default here. And voices, again, that's just the number of separate notes that you can play. Like there's 2, 3, etc. So let's just begin here. We're gonna go in and start with the oscillators and the mixer. And that's because they are in fact intertwined. All right, so your mixer is basically your oscillator levels, and then you have a noise generator here, which is just a standard noise. So if you bring down both oscillators, you turn up the noise, that's it, you just get a noise. Oscillator 1 level, oscillator 2 level. Okay, and keep in mind, kind of like the level of your oscillators will affect the resonance on your filter a bit, like an analog synthesizer. So sometimes you pull back the oscillator levels and you get a more pure resonance, and push it up for a more like oscillator heavy, more driven sound, and so forth. So, and also playing with your output and kind of balancing all that in the particular patch, how you want to set it up. That's just a little bit of sound design tip there. When it comes to the oscillators, you have 2 oscillators, although they have multiple shapes. Okay, and the way that this actually works is that like if you select both shapes on just oscillator A, you don't get 2 separate oscillators, but think of it like kind of adding the shapes together into one shape. So like this is a saw, this is a square, and this is a squarish saw. And it gets louder, yes, but it's not, it like adds the 2 shapes together, but it's not 2 separate oscillators. So you're never going to have them go separate pitches against each other or phased in any way. It's always one oscillator, but you're just stacking the shapes into one thing, completely one thing. Okay. But what's interesting about this is that obviously this is your pulse width, so you can do PWM. But when you add these 2 together, you get like a sawish PWM, which is like a new shape for the Prophet. It gives you that stability of the saw that's always there, plus that PWM on top of it. So that can create more interesting sounds. Right here you have your octaves range. So now this is especially useful. Repro 5 doesn't have like a master octave kind of, or a master tuning, except for up here to negative or plus, but that's kind of useful to use for other functions. So if you want to make bass lines, you kind of bring it down or up. That's useful to use that right here. This is your regular oscillator tuning, so it goes plus and minus an octave. Right, you can see the display up here. It tells you, and when you double click anything, it goes back to 0. All right, like double click the pulse width back to 0. So let's bring oscillator A, oscillator B. Right now they're about the same. All right, and then you can detune them or by octaves. Now, one very important thing in this synthesizer is holding shift. All right, because when you hold shift while you're clicking something, you can do fine-tuning adjustments, because normally your adjustments are pretty broad. All right, so let's kind of bring this together. So if you want that really fine-tuned, you hold shift. Now you only have to press shift as you start the click. You don't have to hold it the whole time. So now I'm let go of shift. And as you can see at the display up here, it's fine-tuning it, which is now very useful. All right, and that's on every single knob in this synthesizer. You hold shift for the fine-tuning. Okay, very, very useful and important. So that's kind of your oscillators right there, as far as just the basic shapes and tuning goes. On oscillator B, you have a triangle wave. alongside this. And as a sound design tip, this particular oscillator is good to use either if you want just a triangle sound, you want that triangle tone that you can't get in oscillator A, or for bell tones or other things like that. Or it's also great to use for bass because it gives you kind of a low fundamental, almost like a sine wave. Like listen to just a square or square plus triangle. You get more, a little bit more sub bass in there. So if you use this as, let's say, your lower oscillator, and you use this as your higher oscillator, for example, like by octaves or something. And by the way, when you don't have any of them pressed, you won't hear anything. So like this, shift, fine tune up a little bit. See, you get like a fatter bass tone by using that triangle oscillator on the lower octave. Now, you don't always have to use that. You know, it's not like, oh, anytime I want to make bass now, I want to use that fatness. It's not always good. It's just you have to use your ears and decide. All right. So there's that. And there's your oscillator shapes. This one also has a pulse width, so you can have like that saw and triangle foundation, and then have like a PWM running alongside that, which sounds different than pure PWM. All right. And then I'm going to get into the sync and the keyboard tracking when we kind of go over this voice mod right here, along with the low frequency. But these are like, if you're just having basic oscillators for patches and you're not getting into like oscillator sync or different FM or things like that, or alternative functions, that's all you need to know for these oscillators. And this mixer, again, bring in some noise like this. So there's the oscillators and the mixer as far as the basic functions goes. Okay. And then, okay, so like right now we're running just a basic saw. Filter is obvious, 24 dB low pass filter. There you go. Bring up the resonance. This knocks down the volume a lot on the Prophet type synth. So this is where you can use this output to boost it back up to how you want, along with these oscillator volumes. Now listen to this real quick. Versus like this. You see how there's a difference in like that resonance? That's what I was talking about with the oscillator levels to the resonance value. And then like when you bring these down, you can bring the level up. And there's also like an extra output volume thing down here that I'll show you in the effects section. But if you're just using this, that's the little tip right there, that you can get different kind of, a little bit of a different resonant sound based on your mixer volume. Okay, so let's again double click, bring this back. There's your resonance, your cutoff. This is envelope amount. So this is your filter envelope right here, ADSR. You should know what that is. So that just, these are a little bit fast envelopes. Okay. And then this is your keyboard tracking. So when it's on that dot, you're basically getting like, if you turn up the resonance all the way to self oscillation, like this. With that dot, you're getting like regular keyboard tracking. So if you want to use some kind of exact keyboard tracking at 100% or self-resonating filter, just know it's 75 at that dot. That's where you're getting it. Anywhere above that or below that, you're getting less keyboard tracking. Like microtonality and things like that, but that's just your keyboard tracking amount. That's the red dot. All right. So there's your, we already went over the filter envelope. Now, one thing to keep in mind on this filter is by default, if you have the envelope down and the keyboard tracking down and the cutoff all the way up, you're not at max on the filter. it's not fully open. You have to have something driving the filter more open in order to really have it fully open, like an envelope. If you want just that flat sustained sound, then you go, just so you're aware of that. All right. And there's other ways to do that with the modulation matrix and things like that. We'll go into that later. You just put something to your cutoff to like raise it higher. But that's what that is right there. And then you have your amplifier envelope, which is obviously, you know, just your basic ADSR amp envelope. Now here you have velocity depth, and here you have velocity depth. So by default it's at 0, but the more you turn it up, the more your velocity affects the amount of the envelopes, or in this case it's the amount of the envelope on the VCA, which is the loudness. Right, so like let's say you have something like this. Turn on velocity. Right, so you can hear how the velocity affects the envelope there, and basically it's the same with the amplifier. All right, so there's your velocity depth. So we went over the oscillators, we went over the filter, the two envelopes. Then I'm just going to go right here real quick into this glide. Now this does not have polyphonic glide, so you have to be running some kind of like a Unison mono mode to have this glide do anything. Okay, so like when you turn on, when you want to have glide, you have to have some kind of monophonic mode. To have it monophonic, you turn on Unison, and then this decides the number of voices. So if you just want a regular synth, like your regular sound at 1, you turn on Unison. Now you can hear the glide. And there's no way to do legato on this synthesizer. It's always re-trigger. Okay, so like every time you're going to hear the... You're going to hear that glide, and you're going to hear that re-triggering every time. Now, when you have Unison on, you can turn up the amount of voices, which is like double stacks your synth, which means like it doubles your oscillators, basically, as well as actually the whole thing. Because technically the way hardware works is like there's like a synth for every voice, and it goes up to 5 or 8 or whatever. But you look up how Unison works on like a synth manual, but you know, basically this is just your Unison, how many voices. One thing you'll notice right away is that the Unison sounds a little slim, and that's where your voice detune comes in, because this detunes your voices. So like when you're running Unison, you detune the two voices from each other. What's a little bit interesting here is that this can be used in other ways. Like later I'll show you how to build chords and stuff using the Unison in part 2. But also even when you're just running polyphonic mode, like let's say we go back to A, and you can have kind of a detuned keyboard effect with this. I by default have it up a little bit like this on my default, because it's not as like straight sounding as this. Right, you hear that versus like, or like if you turn it all the way up. So you can use that even in polyphonic mode to create interesting effects. And I found when I compared it to like the Softube Model 80, for example, which is a pretty close emulation of a Prophet 5 hardware, that without this kind of detune knob, that it's really somewhere Like I'll tell you right now, there's my Model 80 emulation. It's right there. That's about how much it's 16. So that's if you want to have something running like the Softube Model 80, which is a pretty good calibrated synth, put it at about 16. When you turn it down all the way, sometimes the synth can sound a little bit basic or flat. Okay, so go back to init, the regular initial patch here. Good. All right, so now we're gonna go into let's go into the modulation wheel and the LFO. The way that this works is that the synthesizer has technically one LFO only. Okay, although we can use the second oscillator, we can give up the second oscillator completely and use it as an LFO in low frequency mode. And it also has another advantage of keyboard tracking. I'll show you that later. But if we're going to use the regular LFO, it's always automatically linked to the mod wheel. So these two parts right here are linked together automatically, and you're not going to see any way to use the LFO. You're never going to see, well, I wonder where the LFO setting is here. I don't see it anywhere. That's because it's always linked to the mod wheel. So LFO strength is by default linked to the mod wheel when you're using this default LFO. All right. Now, when it comes to that, these are your destinations. You see it says right there, destination. So this is where your LFO plugs into like whatever thing you want. So you have frequency A, which is your pitch of oscillator A, frequency B, pitch of oscillator B, pulse width A, PWM A, PWM for B, and your filter cutoff. All right, so like let's say we want to put our LFO to our filter cutoff. See, we're not hearing anything. Why? You have to bring up the mod wheel. So I can do it here or I can do it on my keyboard. And then when you bring down the mod wheel, it goes away. So this is always like a performance control. All right, and it's totally based on your modulation wheel. This LFO again, so used in default Prophet 5 mode, and this is how hardware works, is always based on your modulation wheel. Okay, so like if we can put it to multiple destinations at once, and the strength is always totally controlled by this mod wheel. Or like let's say I want to have this run to PWM. So let's put this on PWM. It's a little bit harsh. So what happens if I want my mod wheel, let's say controlling PWM, but it's too harsh at the top, like because it is going too much. It's good. See, and then it like takes it off it goes too far where you can't even hear it. You see these little triangles right here? This is like a limiter to your mod wheel. So this is great to have because like you can always set it at a minimum and a maximum. So like let's say I always want PWM on to some extent. Like halfway, right? So now my minimum is there. And let's say I want the maximum on, like not all the way up, but to the point where it doesn't break. See, so this limits your mod wheel range. Right? So there's your mod wheel range limiter thing. And this is especially great when you're using it like to modulate your frequency, for example. Like, because if you go like this, that's a crazy vibrato, right? Like if you're using this as vibrato. I don't want that, but I want to have a nice performance control. So I bring the top level down until it sounds nice. Okay. Let's say I want to just have a tad of that running at all times. I bring my minimum up a little bit. So now it's like... Okay, and then let's say I want to bring that to the filter at the same time. It's going to have that same effect. All right, so that's how that works right there with this LFO shape and these destinations in the mod wheel. The last thing here is that you can, there's a control here that goes between LFO and noise, which is just kind of a little neat function. So you can have this be controlled by noise. So like when you bring up the mod wheel, instead of the LFO, it brings up a noise modulation. And that's really great. And then you can kind of blend the two, like the mod wheel and the noise. And another cool thing here is like, I'll show you, it relates to the modulation matrix and how you can use your mod wheel for other functions. And you can create a second LFO here, for example. But let's say I wanted to have something like this. Like, let's say I want that kind of storm drain kind of sound. I could just completely move these two parameters together, just like this. So, and what this does is it closes the gap. So your mod wheel doesn't do anything anymore because the minimum and maximum is at the same level that you set it. So now this creates a permanent patch for that setting, for that destination. And now my whole patch is like this. Okay, you hear that? That's pretty cool, right? So that's how that works. And then this is, these shapes are just like the oscillator. And this is where you can actually hear how the shape combinations work. So let's bring this back to LFO, oscillator A. So when you combine them, you can hear how they just combine geometrically. Okay, and that's the same thing that's going on with these oscillators. And actually, when we go right now to use this Oscillator B as an LFO, it's going to be the same situation. And obviously, when you turn it to not LFO, that's what's going on with the audio range. It's the same kind of shape combination situation. And there's a way to flip this LFO sawtooth to like go down instead of up. And that's in the tweaks. We'll go over that in part 2. Okay, so and then here you have your host sync, which just syncs your rate to the host rather than being free, which is very useful. So like if I want to have this running 8th notes, which is in your display right there. 16th notes. You know what I'm saying? And like, for example, let's say we had that crazy sound. You know, we could like... We can just think of all kinds of ways to get creative, you know, with that sort of thing. But that's your host sync button. And that's how that whole thing works. So why am I hearing modulation now? Because my mod wheel is up. So let's bring the mod wheel down. Now we're not hearing anything. All right. And then how do we use Oscillator B as a low frequency? When we turn this to low frequency mode, and we can turn off keyboard tracking. What this does is it just makes it a stable LFO and not go up and down by the pitch. Now this turns into a LFO exactly like this one, but it's not linked to your mod wheel. It's linked to your voice mod here. What this voice mod is just like this. You have destinations and amounts, but instead of being mounted by a mod wheel, it's mounted by these knobs right here. And these knobs tell you, okay, we're bringing in the filter envelope or Oscillator B. And this is where you can implement things like FM or use this as a low frequency oscillator. So for example, right now I have this on low frequency mode. Let's turn it on a triangle wave. And we're going to take this to frequency of A. So right now the sound is down because we just use this as a modulator in low frequency mode. So it's below the audio range anyway, so you can't hear anything. Okay, if you turn it out of LFO, it goes back into audio range, but you can hear the keyboard tracking is off. So now it's LFO mode. Turn it down so it doesn't create any weird clicks or anything. And then, okay, so now this is going to go to destination frequency A. So when I bring this up, I bring up, this is what it's being modulated by. So in this case, it's going to be modulated by Oscillator B. So instead of a mod wheel thing, it's just right here. You can hear we're starting to get into FM territory. Okay, and last thing I forgot to bring up real quick is how you can, if you go to low frequency mode, you can use keyboard tracking in low frequency mode to have like a keyboard tracked LFO. And normally it's just the same pitch. If you turn on keyboard tracking, that can be useful for some clever vibrato effects. Like, you know, you just turn it up to. Right? So this is where you can actually get real FM, is you take this out of low frequency mode, and now you have a non-keyboard tracked full audio rate modulator. You have to have it at the right pitch where the settings and everything really work. And then a cool technique for FM and stuff always is like to bring it in, you know, either extreme amounts to get those harsh metallic and other interesting sounds, or bring it in a little bit to accentuate like a sound like this. And then you can use this together with something like your mod wheel. So let's take the mod wheel and take this to frequency A. And then we're going to set like a hard amount with these knobs. Right, so what this is doing now is I'm just showing you how you can do some sound design. Right, so there's like a little patch, and all we have running audible is Oscillator A, and no filters or anything like that. We have some FM from Oscillator B a little bit, and then we included some stable mod wheel setting from the LFO. And you get this little like trippy little pop sound, you know, that can be used for various things. And then let's say I bring the voices to 1. And let's say I want to bring down some of that atonality. I just bring this down a little bit. So you can hear how you can use a little bit of FM and things like that and combine these to make your tones. Okay, so let's kind of get rid of this whole thing. Okay, gonna get rid of this. And you can take this to your pulse width. So let's do that. Creates a different sound. Or the filter. This is filter FM. once with some resonance. But keep in mind, you can only like put the same amount on each one because it's all controlled by one amount knob. So you're kind of limited in that way. This is not a modular synthesizer. But you know, so basically like there's PWM plus. And then if you turn on keyboard tracking, now you have a keyboard tracked audio rate FM, which just creates a different sound because now you're working with intervals. And you have a stable interval every time across the keyboard. When like you're using a certain oscillator shape or something, or like the pitch is very, very high, you may not hear anything. So you have to set it up in such a way that you're hearing what you want. Often FM can, you know, I'm not going to say it sounds good when the FM is lower, but that's it can be higher or lower, but that's just, you know, you play around with that, but that's a good setting. And what you're going to hear now is like you have a more, basically a less inharmonic tone because you're always keyboard tracking and keeping the same interval. And it's less inharmonic because you're having again, you're just running an interval at FM. Okay. And you can bring in now the level of the original oscillator if you want a little bit, because this is audio rate. There's some tips on, you know, how to use FM and stuff like that. And last tip on this too is like, be careful because when you're bringing in FM, you can hear the pitch changes, right? Goes up. Right? So like, let's say I want to bring in that interval, but I want to have it in key. This is where you go to like a tuner plugin. And like, I should be playing an F sharp right now, but I'm not. I'm playing an A. So if I bring this all the way down, there's my F sharp. So be aware of that. And then what you do there is you're using your tuner plugin. This is where that tune comes in, and you hold shift to fine tune. Okay, and now we're just going to play a note. Now we're back in key. All right, so there's a lot of great tips. And when you turn on the HQ mode, you're going to get better sounding FM, especially at extreme ranges. You're not going to hear like a huge change in terms of like the sound because it's meant to have you build sounds without the HQ so you can save CPU. But there's like artifacts like aliasing and weird stuff like that that'll disappear when you turn on the HQ. So there's that, and you can do the same thing with like the PWM, maybe less. Right? So there's like a crazy buzzy sound. Now let's tune this back. And be careful when you have these kind of double pitches. That's when you're kind of like, you can be touching some inharmonic. So if you notice in your song, oh, that sounds like out of tune, even though it's in tune, you know, you might want to bring that down a little bit. Or just however it fits. Okay, so there's a lot of good advice there on using FM and stuff like that and this voice mod. Now, the last thing up here is like this filter envelope. Why is this useful? One is like obviously creating pitch sounds. So like I could go to here and go, this is the filter envelope. Okay, so like I need to have like a, what's a really good use of that? Turn on your oscillator sync. When you have sync, you always want to be running your main pitch that you want to run your synth at is going to be down here in Oscillator B. So this is like your tuning. And you always want to have the tuning at minimum the same or lower, well, lower than whatever is up here, particularly when, you know, you can start at the same, but the sync is always heard when your pitch goes higher than what is the core. Right, so there's kind of like your sync, and let's say you wanted to add some, you know, PWM. You can add also FM sync like this. This is a really cool technique too. And you get very harmonic tones like this. Because you're always, like, by sync, you're always keeping that same tuning. But be careful because, again, really you want to keep this pitch on key and then modify this one. And when you check the tuner, it's going to be following this. So that's a really great technique too. And you can kind of combine them. Right, let's say I wanted to use some PWM along with that. What I could do is just basically use my LFO thing right here and go to PWMA, and then, you know, you just for now bring in my mod wheel. So there's a lot of good tips when it comes to using FM and sync and things like that. So that kind of covers really everything as far as like the basic Prophet 5 stuff goes. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go over this mod matrix in a very, in terms of its main functions. And then there's stuff down here that's a lot of like advanced functions, like that helps to like build chords or create interesting effects, or other, not, you know, they can be different effects. Not necessarily always practical, but, you know, have some specific things. We're going to go into that in the video 2. But in video 1, I will cover the basics of the matrix. One, for example, is like what you're really looking at here is like this, just the top window, and right here where it says the name. Forget all this stuff for now, these little shapes and everything. So in the top window, we have what's controlling it. This is just a basic mod matrix. You can have mod wheel, pitch wheel. Control A, Control B is like set up in MIDI parameters. So like in this case, breath or expression if you have a special keyboard or something. But this is, it can have velocity, aftertouch, the filter envelope, amp envelope. We're going to leave the voice index for the second video. That's like to build chords and different things. But mod wheel, pitch wheel, LFO, trigger, which is just like a little pop, which can be useful for like the start of sounds. The gate is like the full on-off gate, and so forth. So like you can experiment with those, and you have to kind of look up, you know, what they do if you want to get more into just basic synthesis. But like a useful example of this would be like, let's say I'm going here and I'm going to do a LFO with my mod wheel. So there's my sound. But what happens now with my mod wheel? It's lost. I can't use it for anything, right? No, because I can use this mod matrix. And now I can use my mod wheel to, all you have to do here is click and drag like a little target, and you can drag it to any of these parameters. Okay, so a simple one is like cutoff. So like now I can use my mod wheel, for example, for my cutoff, and I can go up or down with it. So let's say it's already high. I don't want to bring my mod wheel to cutoff down and go like this. So you see I'm moving the mod wheel, and it's doing something even though it's limited here, because this limit only applies to this matrix, but not to this. All right, another simple one, for example, is like I can use my filter envelope Okay, let's say, for example, filter envelope, we'll go to the frequency, and I want it to go down, like, woo, like inverted. Okay, first let's bring it up like this, and that will give you the same effect as doing it right here. So like, let's get rid of this LFO thing. But I can have an inverted one. Okay, and we can just do all kinds of interesting stuff here and set up different parameters. Now, one cool thing here is, like, remember how I showed you this LFO and how I can have a pitch tracked LFO. So let's go back to that real quick. We're going to just use this in low frequency mode and pitch track, have this pitch tracked LFO again. But that's fully pitch tracked. One trick here, for example, is you get rid of that keyboard tracking. So now it's just a stable LFO. Right? And then let's say I went to key follow, and then I took that key follow and I put it to Oscillator B frequency, and I turn it up a little bit. You can have a partial keyboard tracking. And it's the same for like FM. So like, let's say I turn this down real quick and I'm just going to listen in a full frequency mode with regular keyboard tracking to Oscillator B. Okay, regular keyboard tracking like this. I could turn that off and take my and turn it up partially. It's like microtonality. Right? And now I can go back down here and use that for my FM for different effects. All right, and then so that's how you use this mod matrix. And you have two things here that are identical, like, so you can have one doing a key follow and one doing something with your aftertouch. Trigger, again, is just like a very quick, like, it's called like a little blip. So like this one is useful to add like a punch in the beginning of a sound. So like, let's say I go back to my Oscillator B frequency. Just like that. Okay, that's trigger, and then your gate is just like the full gate on off, key follow plus pitch bend. So that would change like, so like, let's say I wanted to do something like this. I can also over track the keyboard tracking by like combining these. Or can I? Oh yeah, there we go, keyboard. That's like macro tonality. And then this was also changed with the pitch bend because I added plus pitch. So, you know, that's basically how the mod matrix works. And then I'll explain in the next video. We're going to get into the whole tweaks page. We're going to get into all this stuff down here as far as the mod matrix and, you know, all this sample and hold and all these steps and things like that. And we're going to get into how to use these effects. So look out for part 2 of the video. Please like and subscribe and leave a comment, your thoughts and opinions, whatever. Highly appreciated. Thank you very much and have a great day.